Hey, Missouri 4 H volunteers, welcome to another episode of Volunteer Vibe. For those who could not attend the in person sessions with the new 4 H senior program leader, Dr. Tim Tanner, we wanted to have a special episode of Volunteer Vibe to allow our volunteers the opportunity to get to know him a little and learn about his vision for Missouri 4 H. In this special episode of The Vibe, my co host, Caydance Walters, and I sit down with Dr. Tanner to learn about him and his exciting vision for the future of Missouri 4 H. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Volunteer Vibe. All right. So welcome, Dr. Tim Tanner, and welcome, Caydance, my wonderful co-host. Thank you for joining us both on Volunteer Vibe. Tim, before we delve into 4-H things, would you like to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background for our volunteers?
Sure. So I was born and raised on a farm in Northwest Ohio and enjoyed that life very much. But 4 H happened not to be a direct pathway for me at that time. I actually had a great 4 H experience in sixth grade with one of those 3-day outdoor environmental education experiences. And so that was my taste of 4 H growing up and was a wonderful start for me. Fast forward many years of degrees and other types of things. And eventually I landed as a County 4 H professional in Eastern Ohio and spent 11 great years there. As time went along, I was asked to do a little more and a little more from the state office and others. And that got me into kind of some state level 4 H leadership opportunities. And then for the last 6 years, I've been the South Dakota 4 H program director. So I joined Missouri 4 H here in the fall of 2025. So I've been here about 7 months now and really have enjoyed my experience.
Awesome.
Great. Caydance, off to you.
All right. So you've named your strategic plan, Vision 2045. Tell us a little bit about that and what's the significance of that year. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the things I've learned in my last about 2 decades working for 4 H is that change can come slowly at times. First, folks have to learn about it, hear about it, kind of let it sink in, and then take some time for folks to get on board and be willing to kind of move things forward. That's one piece of it. The other piece is that when I think about how families make decisions for how they're going to invest their time, oftentimes we don't really think about that in a 3-year block or a 5-year block, especially in 4 H. We're hoping that they're thinking about that in a 10-year block. And so really looking at Vision 2045 as kind of a generational level of change so that a family who maybe is choosing to add children to their life, maybe in the next year or two, they would go through this entire era under kind of one consistent framework, which I think is really appealing to parents today.
Awesome. So I had another question kind of off of that. So what stage are you in as far as this plan? What stage would you call it that you're in right now?
Yeah, we are very much in kind of the listening session stage. So I have number 6 is actually tonight, number 7 is later this week, and then that will kind of wrap up the the state tour that I've been making, listening to folks, making sure that this isn't just a state 4-H office plan, that this is very much kind of a ground-based plan, because I know how important that is later on. So we're in that stage right now, and then hoping to kind of unveil I guess you would say, the final product or the final draft later this fall.
Awesome. That's really exciting.
Yeah. Tim, I was really privileged to have the opportunity to sit in one of your sessions recently with the volunteers out in West Central, and it was a really, I think, a very fruitful meeting, and there was a lot of engagement, and people seemed to be really interested in what you had to say. And I know you've spoken quite a bit since joining us about the need for 4-H to return to its origin story. I think that's so interesting. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that and what that means.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit more of outsider to 4-H, having not gone through all of the traditional pieces and parts as a kid. But I became very interested because of that in 4-H history. And when we look at our origin story, we have to kind of place it in the context of the late 1800s, early 1900s. So what was happening during that time? Well, the first thing that was happening is that the Midwest and the Plains states were still being settled. And as folks moved from places further east, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, wherever they came from, they tried to bring that form of agriculture with them. And as they quickly discovered, the soil is different here, the land is different here. You can't do things the exact same way. And so what was happening is folks were moving into these regions, only lasting a couple, 3 years, and then having to move on because they did not have the agricultural practices, the food preservation skills that were allowing them to be successful. And so there were a lot of other things going on related to higher education at the time that I can kind of skip for now because we don't want to turn this into a semester long class. But the important take home message is that there were lots and lots of folks in the country that were interested in trying to help communities be more stable, trying to make sure that folks weren't going boom and bust here on the plains in the Midwest so often. And so they tried some interventions with the adults, and the adults just weren't very willing, weren't really receptive to that knowledge. Okay. We have to remember back in that time, this was the time of hucksters and snake oil salesmen. And, there's been lots of movies made about that era that were kind of humorous and interesting. But higher education, expert opinion, those things were not valued in that time. And so eventually, kind of the leaders of that era turned to youth and said, maybe the youth can bring about these better practices. And so, long story short, kind of the earliest version of 4 H was bringing about that positive community change by working through youth. And when I think about the era that we're in today, there are some similarities there. And is a tremendous opportunity, I think, for the young people of this country to lead us forward, to rebuild our rural communities, to strengthen our urban neighborhoods. There's a lot of opportunity for the young people to lead us again to a brighter, greener future.
That's really interesting, especially when nowadays so many people are talking about innovation and technology and AI and the future and all these things. And you're talking about going back to our origin story. How do you kind of see that as particularly relevant for today? I mean, you touched on it a little bit just now, but how would you kind of expand on that a little bit in terms of relevance to all these trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we think about technology, we often think of it as kind of a linear path towards progress. We often define technology as this, by default, it's going to be a good thing. Well, over the last 15 years, we've introduced social media. I guess it's 20 years now. I'm aging myself a bit. We've introduced social media into the country. We now know that that's a net negative for young people. It's created a whole host of second level effects that were not worth the design of social media from the start. We could go on as to how, technology has also had a significant effect on winners and losers in rural America. So again, not trying to get this into a semester class, all that to say that technology is not always a net positive. And especially when it comes to young people, sometimes they are the ones who have the greatest filters and the greatest understanding of how technology can and cannot be used for the greater good. And so looking forward to turning to them and their expertise as we go forward.
Awesome.
Speaking of youth and expertise, Caydance, would you like to ask the next question?
So what do you see as Missouri 4-H's strengths, and where do you see the greatest opportunities for growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that made the Missouri 4-H program really attractive to me was that it still had a significant commitment to kind of the community service thread that I talked a little bit about there with the origin story. A lot of 4-H programs across the country have become very competition based and very individualized. And those pieces are important. We're not, going to set those to the side because it's still going to be important to build skills in young people. But here, there's still this tremendous thread of community service and trying to give back and trying to strengthen our community. So that's a top piece for me that I really appreciate. I also appreciate that faculty and staff here view things through the lens of possibility. So we're not necessarily optimists. We're certainly not pessimists, but I kind of think of us as possibilitists, to make up a word perhaps. There's just a lot of synergy around the idea of how can we strengthen young people and how can young people strengthen their communities. That's pretty exciting. The last piece I would share is just that Missouri 4 H has a long tradition of kind of being a program incubator. We're often a leader of the pack throughout the country, coming up with new ideas. And we've even had youth recognized at the national level for some of these pieces. And so that's exciting as well.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on, just the possibilities and things that you can improve for 4-H youth around the country. So how does Vision 2045 address the challenge of making 4-H programming relevant to the needs of young people today?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main pieces of Vision 2445 is that we need to expand the table a little bit. One of our weak points in the Missouri 4-H program is that we're not serving as many youth as we need to be. Right now, it's at about 6%. We really should be in kind of the 13 to 15% range based on the level of staffing and support that we have. And so, first is kind of expanding the table and having more youth kind of at the table with us. But then the other piece to that is continuing to strengthen youth voice. We're kind of in an era in which maybe the grown-ups don't have all the best answers. And Vision 2045 is definitely going to provide the platforms and the opportunities for young people to do some leading.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome.
So this question may seem a little out of order, but going back to Vision 2045 in terms of its more specifics, how would you define sort of the core principles and the main goals of Vision 2045, Tim?
Yeah, so I kind of think of this, it's kind of hard without a visual, and so I'll do my best to share this in a podcast type format. But there's kind of four main principles that Vision 2045 is built on. And the first is the most kind of inward facing, even though it doesn't sound that way. It's kind of the getting some of the foundational elements underneath us that are going to help us or set us up for future success. And so the first piece is kind of shifting the 4-H program toward a growth mindset. And again, that's more inward focused. That's removing some barriers, thinking creatively about what it's going to take to retain our teenagers, those types of things. The second main block is continuing to build skills in our 4-H youth with a new emphasis on durable skills. So there are lots of technological things that we could chase, and we will dabble in those. We'll provide opportunities for young people to explore those. But when we talk to employers, when we talk to colleges, when we talk to other adults that maybe aren't as familiar with 4-H, what they do know about 4-H and appreciate is some of those durable skills that our young people are building that other youth don't have. So public speaking, the ability to organize a group, the ability to show up on time and to follow through a project from start to finish. Those are some attributes that are really valuable and important and don't get talked about enough. The third piece is perhaps, once we get some of those initial elements really strong, the third piece is where we start to look a little bit more outward. And so this is kind of the one I call having the most fun, doing the most good. We want to be known in our communities as the group or the convener of youth who are interested in getting together in person, having a great time, and contributing to their communities. That would be a tremendous reputation to have in our communities. And in some locations, we already do. We'd like to see that everywhere in the state. And then the fourth piece is a little bit more of the dreamer piece. It's another reason why it's kind of a 20-year plan, not a 3-year plan. And I've kind of labeled this block as 4-H Thrive Here. And the idea there is that when 4-Hers are thriving in their communities, having the most fun, doing the most good, it's kind of one of those synergy pieces that builds on itself. And then 4-H itself gains kind of a higher platform, a little bit more strength to lead those communities forward. I have a vision that instead of only having a few magnet economies in certain towns and cities in the state of Missouri, that over 200 small towns and neighborhoods within the state of Missouri will be those types of magnets where young people will not only want to thrive when they're teenagers and younger, but also as they age into young adulthood and choose where they're going to live for the rest of their lives. I would like the entirety of the state kind of be a place that our young people would like to stay. And I think that we can lead that change. I think that's something that 4-H is uniquely positioned to help bring forward. So that, again, that's a little bit more of the dreamer phase, but I like where we're headed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Caydance, off to you.
Okay. So, based on the feedback you've had so far from professionals, youth, and volunteers, what's some ideas or directions? What of those are generating the most excitement?
Well, again, I'm only part of the way through the listening sessions, but some of the pieces I've heard that have resonated well so far are I'm going to kind of put in a giant bucket of kind of getting back to the basics. There's a real appreciation, especially from the adult volunteers and parents, that we're going to put a firmer foundation under the program. We're going to invest in the program to make sure that we have opportunities for growth to come in the future. In the past, we maybe had a little bit of a reputation for just kind of introducing novel and new and interesting without maybe focusing and strengthening on kind of those foundational elements. So, from the adult side, that's kind of the piece that I've heard the most so far in my listening sessions. From the youth side, there's a lot of interest around two pieces. The first is kind of the seasonal 4-H club idea, where we would have a more intensive, perhaps a weekly experience, but still traditional. And so our teenagers wouldn't have to necessarily choose between their sports and their extracurriculars. If the winter sports season is the season that they take off, maybe that's the, 12-week block in which they would get their 4-H club experience for the year. So there's been a lot of interest in that kind of idea so far. And then the other piece is just some things that are coming down the pike related to college and career pathways. So introducing more local based apprenticeship opportunities, some more college partnership types of experiences where we get credit for being in 4-H. Those are the pieces that I would say have really stood out so far in the listening sessions.
Tim, if I could just follow up on that, one of the things that I heard that was really interesting to me in your listening session was how you tied 4-H to sort of the current issues facing young people. And I know you mentioned 3 in particular issue roots. And I think it would just be interesting for volunteers also to hear about that, how you kind of see 4-H tied to some of these core issues that are affecting our young people today, because we don't often hear 4-H talked about in those terms. It's just really interesting.
Yeah. And again, Vision 2045 is kind of a comprehensive framework that we'll be using. But at its base, the impetus for it is that we're trying to address youth needs. We're trying to help young people thrive and build skills in their current context, not the world we wish they would live in or facing the issues that they used to face 20 years ago, but the issues they're facing today. And so there are 3 kind of top line issues that young people are facing at the moment that we think 4-H can really help with. The first is poor mental health. And I think our role in that isn't as, mental health providers, but it's our role in bringing together that in-person social experiences. We know that isolation, loneliness, and other similar pieces related to that are some of the biggest reasons why mental health is a struggle for young people today. And 4-H has always been good historically at bringing young people together. And I think post-COVID, we've kind of gotten out of the habit of that a little bit. And so really focusing on in-person social. The second piece that young people are facing today is kind of that massive economic uncertainty and futuring piece. For the last 30 years, the advice has been about the same, right? It's been do well in high school, build a good resume, and then go to college and sort it out. We are at a major tipping point in which that's not always the right advice anymore. Now we're seeing a lot more interest in apprenticeship programs, credentialing programs. We're seeing a lot of folks not wanting to go to the 4-year degree, maybe do a 2-year and then go to the 4-year later on. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Young people are kind of facing this upheaval moment, as it were. And so within that, I think 4-H has always been a great convener of connecting youth to their communities, And one of the ideas that I would really like to see come forward is kind of looking at like what are the top 10 or 15 businesses or interests in your local area that are going to need young people to take over jobs? What is the best way of connecting where youth are at the age of 18 to getting into some of those roles so that if they have interest, they can stay and be strong in their communities? That's something that I think 4 H could play a really strong part in. And then the third piece is engagement with technology. You heard me mention earlier kind of the rewiring effect that social media has had. Online gaming and other features more recently are also contributing to this. And so I think 4 H has always been strong at getting young people outside, getting them into 4 H camps. As I said with my own personal story, that 3-day kind of environmental education camp was a hugely transformative experience for me. And that was even before I've had, kind of all the distractions of technology. I think 4 H can be a really strong place for saying, look, technology has a place, has a part, but it's not the whole enchilada. There's a much better life, a much richer life out there if we provide young people the opportunity to get outside and to connect.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of speaking off of the youth side, as I am still in 4-H, a 4-H member, this is my last year, but that I would say all those things are very spot on, very accurate.
Caydance, would you like to ask our final question for Dr. Tanner?
Yeah. So finally, what would you most want Missouri 4-H volunteers to know about Vision 2045, and how can they be a part of making that a reality?
Yeah, so we're kind of wrapping up or getting close to wrapping up the formulation stage. And so maybe by the time a volunteer has listened to this, we'll be beginning the deployment stage or getting close to it this fall. I think the main piece that I would share is there's nothing in here I think that folks probably need to fear. This is a kind of a roadmap, as it were, that I think all 4-H volunteers can find something in it for them. I think the other piece I would share is that I've always used a metaphor when it comes to 4-H volunteers that I think really makes sense for this moment. And it's a personal love, which is ice cream. When I think about the role of a state 4-H leader or specialists, the staff team, in a lot of ways, our role is to produce the greatest vanilla ice cream that we can produce, right? A solid, stable, wonderful experience, because vanilla ice cream is still ice cream, folks, right? It's great. It's wonderful, at least for those that enjoy ice cream like I do.
Mhm.
But we can only make it in a lot of ways a strong, high quality vanilla ice cream program. And the role that volunteers can play is to bring the sprinkles and the toppings, to add the richness, to add the diversity and the extra experiences that could never happen if we were just a staff-driven program. And I think Vision 2045 provides a lot of opportunity not only for adult volunteers, but also youth leaders to really bring forward not only a type of program, but to strengthen the communities and the state of Missouri in the ways that we would all love to be a part of for generations to come.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon for Missouri 4-H. So, yeah. So, anything else, Caydance, you want to ask Dr. Tanner before we wrap up?
I think that is all. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim, for joining us and for sharing your Vision 2045 with our volunteers. And if anyone has a chance to see or to meet Dr. Tanner in person, you said there's 2 more sessions you're doing? Is that right?
Yeah, I've got one tonight and then Wednesday. So we're wrapping up here shortly. Probably by the time this is out there, those will long have passed, and that's okay. I appreciate all those who were able to make it. And for those that are hearing about Vision 2045 through this podcast, so glad that you could join us today.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tanner. And thank you, Caydance, as usual, for joining us on Volunteer Vibe. See you next time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.